Welcome to this week's episode of Sojourner, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Welcome back to the ongoing series, How Spaces Define Masculinity, a Black and Black Biracial Men's Initiative. My name is Carol Jean Matthews-Shifflett, and I am the CEO of the Sojourner Group. I'd like to start by thanking my sponsors, the Utah Jazz, Planned Parenthood Association of Utah, Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resource, PCAR, the Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault, UCASA, and Enlightened Productions. In Session 3, I'm bringing you 3 men who will speak to you from the LGBTQI+ perspective. Dr. Cleveland Hayes, Associate Dean of Academic Affairs, Professor, Indiana University, Indiana, active member of the American Education Research Association, AERA, an active reserve of the United States Air Force, and his foundation, Meridian, Mississippi. Next, we have Dr. Kenyon Anderson, MSW, PPSC, founder and president at Always Progressing, Inc., and his foundation was Long Beach, California. And lastly, we have OBO Jones, a content creator, entrepreneur. His foundation, Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome, gentlemen. All right, did I get everybody on that question? Did I catch everyone? I'll make sure I didn't miss anybody. Okay. So this next question, I think I may have phrased it or you may have answered it. When did you become aware of your masculinity by society standards? How did that work for you and against you? And how did you navigate? So I'm not sure if we answered that because maybe the question should have been by your own understanding and not by society's understanding.
I'll start with that one, and I'm sorry because I think a lot about this one, and first of all, I think all these gender roles and gender identities is socially constructed, and so once I came to that understanding that if I want to put on a dress, I should be able to put on a dress. If I want, that's just not who I am, and that's not what I do. But those men who I don't pass judgment. Like Billy Porter, I love him as an actor. Pose is my show. I love it. And if he wants to walk around in a dress, then by all means, walk around in a dress. And that doesn't infringe on me. Is my masculine identity? Isn't who I see myself as identity? I think his openness and free to be able to be who he is a threat to those people who are sort of kind of insecure in their masculinity. Mm-hmm. So for me, as I've sort of kind of evolved over the years, that first of all, I'm the only person who can define my masculinity. And if you're not comfortable in the way that I present my masculinity, that's really, really your issue and not mine.
Okay, thank you. Who wants to go next on that question? I'm gonna leave it open.
So I guess I'll go. I don't see him unmuting himself. All right. So I like that you rephrased the question.
Yeah.
I think that when I heard the question the first time, it made me think of a lot of sort of the issues that I had to grapple with as I was trying to figure out who I was. Mm-hmm. The few images that I did see of Black men who were queer or gay or homosexual, depending on where you're at with that, they were very feminine, and like almost to the point where there were a couple movies where like we were able to see drag queens. So it was like, well, if you want to be gay, then you want to be a woman. And I remember being like, wait, no, you're missing it. Yeah. I'm not interested in any of that. Like, I think he's cute and I think that's good, but I don't want to do any of those other things. So I think that there was sort of this societal pressure that you had to perform gayness in a certain way.
Okay.
Like you had to doll it up and you had to be very feminine and you had to sort of be the token gay friend that you see on popular TV, which I wasn't interested in. And in terms of defining my masculinity for myself, it really became a journey of just self-love and like wholly being like, if I can't be right with me, like nothing else that anybody else is saying matters. So it was more about like just coming to terms with my variation of who I am and accepting my uniqueness. And like that is masculinity within itself. And it doesn't need to be checked or validated by anyone else. Like this is just the me that you get, and that's what it is.
Okay. Okay. So, Mr. Jones, since you've heard from the older gentleman, let's hear from you. Let's hear what you have to say
I'm
about
not that much older than Mr. Jones.
I know you are not.
No, like I agree. I think I grew up thinking masculinity was every hyper masculine version of masculinity, right? I thought it was toughness. I thought it was all the things. But I think me now, honestly, when I think of masculinity, I think of confidence. I think when I see somebody just kind of owning who they are, I'm just like, okay, he's cool. You know what I mean? So for me, it's more of a just owning who I am. And I think when I first kind of came out, right? Because what does that even mean anymore, right? So like when I first kind of came out, there was this space of like, oh, this is not gonna be a one-time thing. Like, oh God, because again, the way society is set up, if you do come off masculine, then people are gonna receive you as a straight man, right? So I'm constantly correcting people, like, oh, you know, this girl wants to talk to you. I like guys. You know, oh, you know, where's your girlfriend? It'll be a boyfriend. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like all the things I have to constantly be like, I'm not that, you know?
Yeah.
So I think for me, it kind of is not a burden, but it gets annoying the way people kind of receive masculinity and associate it with whatever. But for me, yeah, I just look at confidence, man. Are you rocking who you are? Because honestly, there's a lot of masculine presenting men who I may perceive as feminine because of your discomfort. When you come off uneasy within yourself, to me, it doesn't read as masculinity to me. You know what I'm saying? Because it feels very forced. It feels, you know, we all know the guys who, you know, yeah, you know, I don't really be at the gay clubs, and yes, you do. It's okay. No, we don't mind. You know what I mean? So like for me now to kind of really be comfortable in my skin, masculinity for me is just really owning who I am and letting that be in the forefront.
That's good. That's good. Okay. So here comes the tough questions, guys. Questions that everybody probably wants the answers to, right? This is a twofold question. Why do you personally believe that Black masculinity is a threat to mainstream society? And then why do you believe, or do you believe, that Black gay masculinity is a threat to Black society? All right, raise your hand. Who wants to go first? Because I know y'all ready for this one. I'm looking.
I'll tackle that one first.
Go ahead, Dr. Hayes.
Well, something that I sort of kind of talk about in my introduction is that, okay, that I study race, and race is the research that I do, and I write on race, I study on race, specifically whiteness and white supremacy. So my work is really, really about dismantling white supremacy. And as I'm understanding that and reading that and understanding that, Black men generationally for 401 years has been a threat to the existence of white supremacy. So the more confident we are, and I'm not talking about those, I'm not talking about Black men who uphold white supremacy because we know that those persons exist. I'm talking about those persons who really, really those persons who work to sort of kind of dismantle that. So as a result, even the hypersexualization of Black men is a result of 400 years of has happened for 401 years since we have been recorded on this continent. We've been on this continent longer than 401 years. So I think that's the threat. I think, and I'll never forget, whatever you want to say about Paul Mooney, I do like him. I do like this one thing that he said around, I think, and I could totally be wrong, is that I think there's an innate insecurity that white men in particular have towards Black men, especially after the civil rights movement, and then Black men start moving in certain spaces and then start dating their women, and their women didn't want them, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a whole host of, we could talk about that in and of itself for a whole webinar, is understanding that. And then in terms of Black gayness in the Black community, I think comes from, in the work that I've been reading, goes back to this term, buck breaking from slavery, that it was seen that if you are, and I think that's where it came from. And so it's just like sort of kind of generational of this. I think it's sort of kind of generational of that gay was a white thing, and gay was, if and it didn't sort of kind of infiltrate Black communities until I'll never forget, Reverend Davis really never started embracing gayness until HIV became such a prevalence amongst Black men in Salt Lake. It's when we start hearing Black ministers talk about it out of the pulpit when it's happened. So that's my hypothesis around that question.
Okay, thank you very much. Ovio, I'm gonna let you go ahead and go next, Mr. Jones.
I'm used to going after Dr. Henderson. So I'm clear. Can you repeat the question just so I'm clear on what the question is?
So why do you personally believe that Black masculinity is a threat to mainstream society? And do you believe that Black masculinity is a threat to Black society, Black communities, Black people?
Black gay masculinity was the second one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tackle that one first. I think when it comes to being gay and masculine, to Dr. Anderson's point, most people just don't understand it, right? They just simply don't get it. And so I think, because you have gay men who don't get it, you know what I mean? So and I think we have to actively try to get it. And so I think I've had guys who I tell I'm gay and say, no, you're not gay, girls like you. And I'll say, well, what does that have to do with me liking them? You know what I mean? But there's this really clear vision of what gay is. And even when it comes to women receiving gay men, a lot of women are more comfortable with effeminate gay men than they are masculine ones. I think a lot of them view you as an option. You were an option for me, and now you're not, right? A lot of people view you as a threat to, families, right? Because gay men can't procreate with each other, that now we're putting a threat on making more life. And I think it's all a bunch of shots at trying to understand something that people just simply don't get. And I think conversations like this will help people understand that. Again, for me, I even kind of resent when people say oh, I knew he was gay, right? Because in my mind, gay isn't a behavior, right? You can't act gay. Whether he was feminine or not doesn't make him attracted to men. But we then associate behavior with sexuality. I think we have also a separate conversation centered around that, because what you do has nothing to do with who you do. But, we could talk about that for years. But when it comes to masculinity in general, I think, well, Black people in general are viewed as aggressive by non-Black people or non-POC. And so I think when it comes to that side of the window, right, when you add masculinity onto something that I'm already afraid of based on skin complexion alone, it then becomes even more of a threat, right? So not only is he Black, but he's Black and what we consider to be masculine, I'm afraid. And so it's kind of the same thing I think that applies to women in the workplace, right? When she has an opinion, she now becomes bossy. And I think likewise to masculinity, and when it comes to Blackness, you're checking too many boxes. Like Dr. Anderson said earlier, you only have one box to check, buddy. You can't be Black and gay. You can't be Black and masculine. You got to pick one, buddy. What we gonna do? And so I think it's kind of those pieces that add to that puzzle.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Anderson.
This is such a loaded question. And I'm trying to figure out what angle I want to start off with it. I think I'm going to follow suit with my predecessor and just sort of speak to, I guess, the dangers of being Black gay, Black queer. And it oftentimes it's either centered around family or it's centered around religion. And how I've received negative messages. I have lots of cisgender female friends, and something they think is a compliment, which is actually annoying, is, well, if you like girls, we could but we can't because I don't. So you're on your own with that. So sort of there's this notion of my existence is now a waste if I can't procreate. And I sort of have received that messaging where it's but this is 2020 and I could procreate if I wanted to, and there are means and ways to make it happen. The other downside that I've sort of seen is just sort of utilizing religion in order to talk about the structure of what family should look like. That could be a whole nother webinar, but there are definitely some flaws in that thinking. To my understanding, God makes no mistakes. So I won't justify my existence to anybody who needs me to justify it. Now, when we talk about this, our existence as a whole, We talk about our existence as a whole and masculinity being a threat to popular culture. I find most often that people really like Black culture, but do not like the downsides that come alongside with being Black.
Mm-hmm.
So you can listen to my music and eat my food, but you don't know the anxiety that I face when the police are behind me. That isn't a part of your experience. So I think that there is this desire to take part of without being a part of when it comes to our culture. And that has a lot to do with the messages we receive about who can do what and what it looks like. You know, Black women have been shapely from the beginning of existence. But when other particular groups go and they buy those bodies, it's more glorified. And I think that this is sort of the same token. Like, if I was someone else, my masculinity wouldn't be questioned as a threat to popular culture. But because of my identity in the intersection, it's like a double layering. Like you can't check too many boxes. You got to stand over there.
Gotcha. And you're so right. You made some really good points right there. Now, I'm gonna add a question that I did not make you all aware of. I have no problem with interracial adoption. How do you feel, or do you feel, that a Black gay man can raise, I'm sorry, white gay men can successfully raise Black boys to be Black in society, Black in this community? Go ahead.
Can I take that question? So, in addition to the
Yes,
other
you
roles
can.
that I carry, I'm a professor at a university here in California. One of my colleagues here, she talks about this notion of jigsaw children. So we see people who have developmental ages, they have life experience ages, they have their physical age, and then they have their cultural age. So I do not believe that it's not to say that white men cannot raise Black boys.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that if you decide to take that on, that you have to be very intentional in engaging with culture in ways that are truly representative of who they are. Because you adopting them does not negate the fact that the world is going to see them as Black men.
Mm-hmm.
I see all of these posts online and like these little Black boys, they're posting these signs, and it's like, at what point do I become a threat? And I think that when we speak from this lens of colorness, we're actually speaking danger, because we have to equip them with the tools and responsibilities. You have to be able to have the talk in the world that we still live in, because there's a talk that Black parents have with their Black kids. And if you're not actively engaging in culture in ways to be equipped to have those conversations, then you're doing them an injustice. I'm very fearful of anybody raising a Black kid and not instilling an awareness of this world into them, whether it be boy or girl, because we know by numbers alone, and I don't think anybody can, you can try to debate me down on this, but we know by numbers alone that we're disproportionately represented in more negative factors across the board. So we can't not have these conversations. And I think that in that premise, my concern would only be, how are you actively engaging in raising that Black boy to become a whole Black man? Your sexuality, your ethnicity, I really don't care about those parts. I want to know about your active role in making them whole.
Thank you. I think you covered it all, but I'm sure there's more that the two of them, your partners here, would like to add to that, because that is, somebody asked in one of the webinars, so what do we do? Is church the only thing? And so we started talking about, there's so many other ways to engage young Black boys and girls, but young Black boys when you're being raised by a white parent. So Dr. Hayes, you lean forward there, so I think you want to say something.
You know, and I'm like Dr. Anderson, I don't have an issue with it either. And I've been very, very clear about that, but I'm actually fearful of, like, I had a really, really good friend of mine from college who adopted a son. He just turned two a couple weeks ago. And which I emailed Lee when he posted the pictures of the son on Facebook. It's like, oh wow, that's really, really progressive of you. I would have never gathered that from you from high school. From Mobile, Alabama, for heaven's sakes. So not to centralize a stereotype, but you just don't, grow up in the South at that age, you just don't, this is sort of kind of my generation sort of kind of coming out. And so Leaf and I had, his name is Leaf, my friend's name is Leaf. And so we've had this conversation repeatedly, like he posted on Facebook a picture of his son, and it was darker than his son is. I was like, okay, you need to go back and talk to the photographer about that, because right. and then after George Floyd happened, I'm like, okay, are you ready to have this conversation? And be prepared for this conversation, because right now his son is small and not, but this is not going away. You're talking about 401 years. And so when his son gets 18 or whenever, when he's no longer cute, you got to be prepared for that. You got to be prepared for that. And so I think, and I do struggle with gay white men dating, marrying, adopting back kids, girl or boy, is because sometimes their world is so insular in terms of their interactions with other Black people. So how are you going, and just going to church on Sunday is so much more to understanding our experience. And if you don't have any Black friends at an intimate level, I'm not talking about people that you work with or your past hookups and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about people that you know at an intimate level, that you can have these really, really hard conversations, and you can sit with discomfort when I tell you that your white male fragility is showing up around this conversation. Then you may need to really, really sort of kind of rethink that around that conversation around adopting, especially. And then we hadn't talked about this, but colorism is going to come up. Where you are on the spectrum, will depend upon how you sort of kind of move to society. So now you have these two white gay men with a dark son. It's going to have a much different experience than two gay white men with a light-skinned son. Mm-hmm. With light eyes. And so that's going to have a huge, I caution, are you taking the kid, or do you know you need to go to the barbershop? And do you understand Black girls don't need their hair washed every day? And are you talking to the sisters in the hood or wherever, so they understand you have to put some oil on that hair. You got to, it's just so much, and hair is such a part of our identity, and so much of our identity. I don't have any more now, but it's still such part of our identity that you have to, it takes some time and process to understand that. And if you don't have your best Black girlfriend or whoever that can tell you like it is, like I never forget this episode of Grey's Anatomy where they adopted Lola. And they had a whole conversation, got to give Shonda Rhimes credit for this. They had a whole episode of teaching Dr. McDreamy how to do her hair. She was showing up, her hair was a hot mess. And they brought in Bailey, and if you're not familiar with the show, you don't get these characters. There was a whole conversation around that, and it's hair and conversation and food and understanding why some Black people don't like mayonnaise. There's so much more about our culture that you're not going to get at church, beyond just church.
Beyond church. And on Grey's Anatomy, Shonda Rhimes, Meredith is the mother of biracial children as well. And so the two of them have worked really well together to bring this to the forefront in the show. So, okay, Mr. Jones, your turn. Do you need me to repeat the question, or are you good?
Ditto to both. That's all
okay.
Ditto.
Stay tuned for the next episode on How Spaces Define Masculinity, a Black and Black biracial men's initiative.